Hour 2 Overdrive continues, powered by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line of the final score. Bryan Hayes, the O-Dog, Jeff O'Neill, Dave Feschuk of the Toronto Star. As of now, no news on Vladdy and the Jays avoiding arbitration. We'll see what comes of it in the next half an hour. Steve Phillips at 5:30. Pierre LeBrun in a few moments. Leafs in Carolina tonight. So they got Carolina tonight, then at home against Vancouver on Saturday. I'm sure the Canucks love the idea of playing on hockey night in Toronto with everything that's going on. They lost again last night. It's like the worst possible nightmare is you got to roll into Toronto when all hell is breaking loose. And that's what they're facing. And Pettersson was a game-time decision again last night, but did not play. And other than the game in Montreal where they put up a few goals, I think they lost 5-4, they can't score. There's just no offense out of Vancouver.
It's like they got to figure out which direction they're going to go in with the situation. It's either like a big boy meeting with all the players involved, the key players. I'm talking about Miller, Pettersson, Jimmy Rutherford, Rick Tocchet, agents. Like, can you guys coexist or not? Which I think it's crazy that they couldn't, because for them to be a solid team, you got to have that 1-2 punch. But on the other hand, if one hates the other one so much that the thought of going in the locker room and seeing their face is not going to work out, then you got a serious problem.
Yeah, and I would think
it's got to be resolved one way or the other.
Exactly, and you know, the reports are that they're listening on both players, Miller and Pettersson, which is wild when you think about it.
Well, you kind of got to put that out there to see what kind of stupid offers you could get. You know, some team might pop up and offer something crazy.
Yeah, and like Pettersson's 40 games into an 8-year deal at $11.6 million with full no move, full no trade. That's another thing. Like, there's a chance Pettersson jams you up, or Miller, and they're not interested in going. They've all got no trades. Everyone's got a no move in this league. You know, if you're a star player, it's very complicated to make a trade. And that's the reality with these two guys.
Well, we do know one thing, guys. O's old pal Jimmy Rutherford, he's not going to sit on his hands here. He's not going to let this thing fester too long. Like, he's a man of action if there ever was one in an executive suite. And I would imagine that he's had those conversations with all those people you mentioned, O-Dog, like the agents and the players and everybody in that locker room of substance. And I would imagine he knows exactly which way he's going to go if he can get the right offer.
Yeah, I would think it's Miller that goes, because just Pettersson's so much younger. I believe Pettersson and Hughes, I believe they have the same agent. I think there's a connection there, right? And like Quinn Hughes, this guy's the captain of the team. He's one of the best players in the league. He's coming off of Norris. He's probably looking around saying, what the hell is happening here?
No kidding. Like, I'm the captain. I have to take responsibility for this team's performance every night. And I want the best team possible, and the team is best when both guys are in the lineup and playing well. Mm-hmm. So I would be shocked if there wasn't a meeting with the three of them, like with Quinn Hughes heading it, saying, "What the hell are we doing here? Like, can we not sort this out?"
It's crazy because they were so good last year. Miller was so good up until Pettersson signed his deal. He was great.
Dude, didn't they win? They won the division.
Yes, they won the division. They were a point or two out of the President's Trophy. Mm-hmm. They were phenomenal last year, and they were juggernaut. It never slowed down, and they all played great. So I don't know what changed. You know, I guess from the outside looking in, it would appear as if when Pettersson got that money and he stopped performing, I could see that being an issue with guys in the room. And again, I'm simply speculating here. But if there is a belief that JT Miller has been tough on Pettersson, throw in the fact that he's making way more money now and then underperforming, that is a recipe for disaster. If you have a guy in Miller or a veteran who looks at younger guys and goes, what the hell do you think you're doing? Now you really got to put up or shut up. I could see that, you know, in a way poisoning the relationship that much more. That's purely speculation, but that's all we have at this point because it's just so strange what's happened with Vancouver. And last night, probably the bigger story from a hockey standpoint is Pierre-Luc Dubois had 2 goals, including the OT winner. Yeah. And he's on pace for like 65 points this year.
Here's a word that he looks, which is the best compliment you can give him after the 2 years that he's had. Engaged.
Yeah. Like he cares about playing hockey.
Like celebrations, doing the bow and arrow celebration, pushing guys over, punching guys. It's just, you watch him, it's like, where in the hell have you been?
You talk about a fly on the wall. I'd love to see Rob Blake walk past Pierre-Luc Dubois and say, "Hey, Pierre."
Dude, Robbie Blake had to go on the ice with him last year and say, "This is what we want you to do in the corners and stuff." It's called competing.
Yeah.
Actually had to go on the ice with him.
And they flipped him. After a year, they're like, we got to get rid of this guy.
Yes.
It cannot exist anymore.
And it was warranted.
Absolutely. And listen, to the credit of the Kings, they haven't lost a step.
No.
They're on fire. They still play well without, because he didn't contribute anything last year.
Yep.
But Pierre-Luc Dubois, like everything else in Washington, is working out. Here's Pierre LeBrun, our TSN hockey insider, joining us here on the Maple Title Hotline. Canucks or Pierre-Luc Dubois? Bigger story for you last night.
The Canucks are a big story every night, so that's more like any day ending in Y these days. But, just to finish that thought, I was listening to you guys coming on, and it's one of those trades that could end up being a win-win, which you don't have. Everyone likes to say that, but it doesn't happen that often in the league. How about Darcy Kemper, who goes the other way in the Pierre-Luc Dubois trade? .920 save percentage for the Kings. He's 11-2-5.
Wow.
So,
that's big.
I don't know. So, now he's battled a few injuries here and there. That would be the knock on him. But he's looked right at home in L.A., and it's funny because I talked to him when the Kings were here early in October, and he had a feeling that he would fit in so nicely with the way the Kings play and so on. But it was been unreal. And, one of the things that Spencer Carberry told me earlier this season about Dubois, it wasn't just that he was giving Dubois the hardest assignments, the hardest defensive assignments, hardest minutes, but that Dubois as a teammate went out of his way to talk about how Dubois as a teammate in the room had been unreal right out of the gate. So pretty neat story, actually.
Yeah, that is. Yeah, that's significant, man. I mean, I'll credit him because he didn't really give you any opportunities to offer up any positive commentary, about him, about his game, about the way he went out in Winnipeg. His first year in LA, and he's been great. He's been engaged. Everything's working for Washington. And, as for Vancouver, like the Pettersson scenario is curious to me because generally I find, Pierre, correct me if I'm wrong, in the modern game, guys that are game time decisions, like 99 times out of 100, they play. Yeah. And he's been a game time decision the last couple of games, and he hasn't played. Like, what's going on with this guy?
Hazy, before you answer, Pierre, that would piss me off if I'm a coach, anybody else. It's like, oh, really? What, did you take warm-up and you just can't go tonight? Like, I don't know. It would drive me nuts, man.
Right. I don't have much to add on that. And, I asked the same questions, and they say he's very close. Should be playing any game now. So we'll see where that goes. I mean, again, we talked about this last week, but it's been such an unbelievable time period for the Canucks. And it really, in terms of this story going next level, guys, it has to go back to right before Christmas. There was a regular morning skate at Vail where Quinn Hughes, who was just trying to be a good captain and he's a very thoughtful guy, basically confirmed what, everyone was dancing around, right? Which was that, trying to get along and, got issues and essentially by the end of the answer ends up naming both JT Miller and Pettersson. And again, not in a negative way, in a way that, I'm the leader and we all have good days and bad days. But, and then Rick Tocchet as well got into it in his avail. But what it did that day, if you track all this story back and the momentum it's had, is that it confirmed publicly what everyone had been tracking, right? It's one thing to know from your sources and, look at the body language. It's another thing now for the team to come out and basically say, yeah, this is going on. Pretty unique. I mean, I've not seen a lot of NHL teams deal with it that way, and it's okay. Maybe that's their way out of this, whether it's via trade or via finally fixing all this in the room. But
how do you see it playing out, Pierre? Like, what do you see the end game here? 2 months from now, are they both on the roster? Which one's gone? Like, what's your final play here?
My prediction is one is gone. It's not an easy trade, whoever it is. So let's start with JT Miller. I mean, he's obviously a big leader on that team. He's got a full no move, and I know from checking in this week, he's not asked for a trade, and the Canucks haven't approached him about waiting. Now, that obviously can change with one phone call, but, I always like to say, let's start with the facts. So that's that. On Pettersson, who does not have no move protection until July 1st, so he has no say right now, but, and listen, the Canucks are talking to teams on both. That's been out there. That's confirmed. I've talked to a bunch of teams. what's hard to know right now is how many teams are calling out of pure curiosity and how many teams want to bring that conversation next level. One of the things that, one team said to me is, hey, like, Pettersson's in year one of an 8-year deal paying him $11.6 million a year. We want to make sure if we decide to go, and I don't know if this team will or not, but if we decide to go next level, that he is that player. Because it's been a struggle, really dating back to late last year. So, it's absolutely fascinating drama. And as I said the other night on Insider Trading, by the way, lost in all of this is that Rick Tocchet's deal expires at the end of the year. Last year, Jack Adams Award winner as Coach of the Year. There is an option on his contract, mind you, but still. And again, that doesn't mean that he won't be extended. Rob Brind'Amour coached right through his deal last year before signing, so it's not uncommon. But I don't know. It's just another little thing to say to yourself, if you're Rick Tocchet at the end of the year, and this was a year that probably tops any year he's ever had in terms of everything going on. I don't know. It's just another thing to file away, I guess.
Hey, Pierre, speaking of Brind'Amour, the Leafs into Carolina tonight, into O's old stomping grounds to face the Hurricanes. And, the Hurricanes are an interesting team because they've had goalie health problems, kind of like the Leafs. Kochekov's been good, but they've had Freddie Anderson in there, Dustin Tokarski. I think they've gone through about 5 different guys this season already, halfway through. What do you make of the way the Leafs are handling Stolarz' absence with that in mind? Because what is he now? This will be his 20th start of the year. He's been in 10 of the 15 games since Stolarz went down. And this is a guy with a career high of 23 starts. Like, this is not a guy who's got a track record of durability. Like, you've looked at this subject a lot in this league. What do you make of the way the Leafs are handling this?
You're right. I am fascinated by goalies, and yet I still know nothing about them.
Yeah.
That was one of the interesting things that Leafs management talked about internally when they made their plan of going with Stolarz and Wall. Stolarz, really one of the real clever signings. There were other teams that were in there hard too, because everyone had looked at his numbers under the hood in Florida, but the Leafs got him. But the one thing that Leafs management knew is that they were combining Stolarz with Woll, two guys who had never really carried the ball far in a year. Neither one had ever been a workhorse. So the plan was that between the two of them, when you collect their starts, they can get through the year and get excellent goaltending. They have had excellent goaltending, but, they both guys have missed time, right? Wall at the start and now Stolarz. But, you look at where the Leafs are and goaltending numbers and goals against. There's zero argument other than to say it's been a success so far. But we're halfway through the year. So let's see how this keeps going. And the one thing that's good for Wall right now, I'd say, is that the Leafs don't have any back-to-back games until after Four Nations. I was just reading that in Mark Masters' notes. So, that's a pretty good setup in terms of giving him as many starts as you think he can take for quite a while. In terms of the Hurricanes, I've reported this before, but they do want to upgrade in goal. Listen, they believe Kochekov's a true number one, but they're a little nervous what happens if he goes down, especially come playoff time. Freddie Anderson is still out. What's he going to be like when he returns? They've been calling around, probably more so than any other team in the league over the last couple of months, looking at the goalie market. One team that they've re-engaged with is Anaheim on John Gibson. I don't know if that will ultimately lead to a trade because he's got 3.5 years left at a pretty big ticket. Gibson's been unreal this year in Anaheim. It's been a real renaissance year for him. So the Ducks are asking, for...
What does that mean, Pierre, though, for Carolina? There's 2 years left on his deal. They need a goalie, so you go get him. Like what?
I think they should, dog.
No kidding. Well, that's what I don't understand. Like, what's the stopper there? Like, there's two. You got to pay the guy if you want to get him. What, do they not want to pay him?
Well, I mean, listen, before this year, to be fair, I'm just going to play devil's advocate. First of all, I'm with you. I think they should go get Gibson. They went pretty far, by the way, in Gibson trade talks last summer, and it ended up not happening. And now they were engaged again. But
you know what I think of going pretty far in trade? Like, give me a break.
Well, I know. It's not done until it's done. And I'm with you. The devil's advocate position, just to play counter with you, is that before this year, Gibson had kind of had a few years of injuries and uneven play. So you have to take the whole thing in. Now, what I've seen from him this year is I think he's back and he's motivated and he's, the Ducks tell me he's got a great attitude. if I'm Carolina, that's a big move. Now, in the meantime, the Hurricanes are also phoning around looking at an offensive upgrade. They're looking at forwards too. So, Carolina is always in the thick of things trade-wise, and that's what they are right now. So we'll see where that goes.
With Pierre LeBrun, our TSN Hockey Insider, it was a year ago yesterday, William Nylander signed his 8-year deal, January 8th, 2024. The reason I bring that up, the reason I bring that up is I guess it was this time last year where the Leafs said, all right, enough, let's just do it. Like, that's the number, that's the term, let's go, which would suggest they're comfortable with doing that around this time of year. Tavares is different because of his age, and the contract's going to look different, but Mitch is this year's William Nylander. I don't sense it's anywhere close.
You're listening to Mitch Marner, just to be sure.
Pardon me?
Mitch Marner. You said Mitch.
Yeah,
Marner,
I'm talking Mitch Marner. Yeah, I'm talking Mitch. Yeah, where is Marner at? And I get the impression like maybe he wants to play this out and sniff around free agency or something like that. And I'm curious your take on that, like the idea of him betting on himself. What I find interesting about that is if you're betting on yourself, that means you better show up in the playoffs, and you're also banking on your teammates showing up and helping you have that opportunity to bet on yourself in the playoffs. Mm-hmm. It seems like a bit of a gamble. If he really wants to be here, like really wants to be a Leaf for life, why would he possibly wait any longer? Like, why wouldn't you try to get this done immediately if the Leafs are willing to do it?
Yeah, no, it's the question, and give Marner and the Leafs and Brett Shirley credit, and Darren Ferris, the agent. It's not been a headline story most of the year, which is pretty unbelievable. Nylander sucked up way more oxygen a year ago compared to this negotiation, which arguably is just as important, if not more so. What I would tell you on that is this, that there's no, and I've written about this before, but there's no question in my mind that part of the dialogue that I think has been a stumbling block in that conversation is that, much like Colorado's doing with Nathan MacKinnon's cap number in the Mikko Rantanen conversation, the Leafs obviously have pointed to Austin Matthews' AAV and saying, can't really pay anyone more than that. And I understand that from the team perspective. What I would tell you from the agent perspective is the salary cap is going up aggressively here over the next year or two. And depending on what happens between the league and the PA, maybe even more so.
I feel like I've heard that 4 years in a row, and it doesn't happen.
Well, no. Now, Bettman has talked about at the Board of Governors, ODOG, that they want to match the cap potentially in a phase to the revenues that are expected to jump up aggressively. The point being that if you're Darren Ferris with Mitch Marner, or if you're Andy Scott of Octagon with Mikko Rantanen, your counter to the so-called internal cap conversation is that it's not the AAV that matters, it's the percentage of the cap, and the cap's going up. So I think that's been a real stumbling block, and those two negotiations have a lot of parallels in Colorado and Toronto. And it's actually why this week I wrote, kind of just thinking out loud, not because someone had told me something, but with all these deferred contracts that we've seen of late, well, we've only seen 4, but, is there a way, since the Leafs have already done a deferred contract with Jake McCabe, is there a way to massage an AAV with deferred payments on a Marner extension? I will tell you that I don't think that probably interests the agent. 90% of agents that I've heard from in the wake of the Frank Petrano contract are against deferred payments. They don't like the concept. They don't like the idea. So it probably isn't a solution in this Marner thing. So it really comes down to this, guys. I don't think the Leafs feel they can or will pay more than $13 million, maybe $12.5 million. Is that good enough for Marner on an 8-year deal? Remember, he can get 8 here, but 7 on the open market. Mm-hmm. And if that's where it is, and again, I'm a lot of this is my own read on things. The other side is talking, but I think that's the clear line of demarcation around 12.5 to 13 million a year.
Yeah.
If that's where everything is, it probably behooves both sides to wait a bit, I guess, because what's going to change?
Well, this is, I guess, my point, and part of me, I guess, just from experience living here and knowing the market, and this season is another example of it. I'm sure both sides realize, it could be loud for a few weeks, but by next season they'll play well and they'll win in the regular season and everyone will shut up about it. And that's probably what they're banking on. And the reason why I preface my comment is because I do think that that's important to point out, and that is probably what they're considering. But what I'm reaching at here is with the, betting on yourself. I like that mentality. I like that attitude. Like, I'm going to bet on myself. I'm going to show you guys we're going to do it this year. We're going to win. And if Marner's great and they go to a cup final or something, then guess what? He's going to ask for whatever, and the everything will flip, and everyone will say, you better pay him, you better sign him, and all the pressure will be on the Leafs at that point. I like that mentality, but it's a gamble, because if you show up in the playoffs and you don't perform and you lose in the first round, this market is going to go insane. And Mitch will be at the forefront of it, and he knows that. And then it becomes a scenario where you could be in trouble if you really want to stick around long term. I guess that's what I'm saying. Like the most comfortable way to do this, if you're Mitch, if Marner's like, I'm committed, I want to be a Leaf for life, do it before the playoffs.
Well,
do it before the playoffs.
He might.
Yeah. Well, and I listen. I'm not his advisor. He'll do whatever he wants to do, but I would suggest that would be in his best interest.
Yeah, and I guess where I would differ with you, Brian, is, and again, this is just me reading the tea leaves, but he talked about maybe him betting on himself and looking at what serves July 1st. My guess is the opposite. I think he actually really, really can't see himself in any other uniform than the Toronto Maple Leafs, but is trying to follow his agent's advice and make sure that his agent's taking care of this problem.
Sure, and I understand that. It's a business. I get it, but
the other thing too, and I know this side of it's a bit, it's not that exciting to talk about. Gary Bettman doubled down the Board of Governors last month when we were all there, the panel, and said that if all goes well, maybe he's got a new CBA to announce in June at the Cup final. Well, if there's a new CBA in June at the Cup final, you're going to know if the cap jumped way more than it's supposed to, and that will probably have a pretty big influence on things, both for Marner and Rantanen, will it not?
Sure.
So I think gaining more knowledge here with what's going on in the PA and the league is also not nothing in all this.
Valid from their standpoint, for sure. Now, and again, like you said, if the Leafs say, I don't care if there's 15 new CBAs, no one's making more than Austin.
Right. That
then
could be, yeah.
We'll see if they actually stick to that or not. But if they are and they're serious about it, then ultimately it doesn't matter about that CBA. It's irrelevant, right? It's completely irrelevant for all these guys. If Rantanen wants to stay, you can't make more than 12.6 or whatever, because that's what MacKinnon makes. And
it's very simple. If you want to make that, then you got to play. You're playing somewhere else.
That's it, exactly. If the teams have the backbone to stick to it, right? It's easy to say it right now. They may not stick to it.
And the players both have to say, I get to play with Austin Matthews and Nathan MacKinnon. Do I want to go play with not even close to that? And that's what you got to weigh. That's where the pressure points come in.
That's it.
And Marner and Rantanen are great players on their own for sure, but exactly what we just said, Dog, is life without Austin for Mitch and life without Nathan MacKinnon for Mikko Rantanen. Those two guys have been thick as thieves forever, right? Since they've been NHL players, and and this is not a shot at Marner at all. It was an unbelievable player. He's going to play for Team Canada. He's having another great year. If Mikko Rantanen's playing on the Canadian team, forget about it. In terms of people still sleep on his greatness in my mind.
Yep.
Look at his playoff numbers. The guy's a horse. The guy is an absolute horse. So that we're in Toronto and it's the Leafs, so of course the Marner thing is bigger. But I'm telling you, that Rantanen one is one that people around the league are really paying close attention to. If somehow that guy goes to market, my goodness.
Well, they're tied in points right now. Rantanen and Marner, they're tied for third in league points right now with 58, but Rantanen's got 10 more goals. So yeah, I would say his case is pretty strong. And there's a bigger gap between MacKinnon and Matthews too, right? MacKinnon's at 12.6, I think Austin's at 13.25. It's not a ton, but it is something. So if the internal cap is lower in Colorado, take that for what it's worth as well.
Well, MacKinnon also signed the deal 3 years ago, so that's also different than Matthews. I think that strengthens probably Rantanen's camp's case of it's call leapfrog. Like Rantanen leapfrogs now, then MacKinnon leapfrogs later.
And then McCarr goes over all three of them anyway.
Right.
Exactly. That's what's coming. All right, Pierre, we'll leave it there. Thank you, buddy.
All right, go Packers.
Go Packers. There it is. I love hearing that. Pierre LeBrun, our TSN Hockey Insider, joining us here on the Maple Toyota Hotline. Count on Maple Toyota for the right winter tire package for your Toyota. Trade in your old tires, buy a new set, and get $40 back. Visit mapletoyota.com. All right, panel night tonight. You got a quiz cooking? Got to be a quiz.
Oh, there's all kinds of stuff cooking. It's going to be a great night.
Can't wait. Leafs Hurricanes tonight on TSN 4. Going to be a fun one. All right, buddy. We'll catch you tomorrow at 4.
See you, boys.
There it is, Jeff O'Neill. Dave Feschuk of the Star sticking around. We got Steve Phillips coming up, Mark Schlereth coming up, Jack Armstrong, and we're teeing up the Leaf game tonight. Overdrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN 4. All right, Overdrive continues. Steve Phillips will join us here in a moment. TSN 1050, of course, wants you to be our unofficial correspondent at the grittiest golf event of the year. To enter, you got to download the iHeart Radio app, create an account, and listen to TSN 1050 for at least 15 minutes straight. And once you hit 15 minutes, follow the prompts to complete your entry. Whether it's 15 minutes of First Up or 15 minutes of Overdrive, the more you listen, the better your chances. And on January 20th, First Up will be calling one listener with a trip for two to the Waste Management Open in Arizona. Full details at tsn1050.ca. Can't beat that, Dave. Cannot beat that.
What a trip.
Unreal trip. Unreal. And, I guess we got golf going on right now in Hawaii, actually, right? It's not this. Is it the Sony still? I thought Sony got out. I'd have to look it up. I thought Sony got out.
It's the old Sony.
The old Sony. That's all that matters. The second tournament in Hawaii. So we'll look into that a little bit later this afternoon. The Leafs and Raptors in action tonight. The Blue Jays, I guess, getting some work done today. They've avoided arbitration with Dalton Varsho, Alec Manoah, Ernie Clement. Mm-hmm. Haven't heard anything on Alejandro Kirk yet. Haven't heard anything on Vladimir Guerrero Jr., which is a bit confusing for people because we kept talking about that 1 p.m. deadline.
Right.
That evidently is not a deadline at all. What's the point of a deadline if, we're still figuring this out? Here's Steve Phillips, our TSN baseball insider. What is the 1 p.m. deadline worth, Steve, if you can continue to negotiate well beyond it?
Well, you could continue to negotiate all the way up until and through your arbitration hearing. So the deadline is about when you have to file numbers and get those numbers submitted. But, there are a lot of negotiations that are ongoing that will continue. Now, each organization is a little bit different. The Blue Jays have always been let's put it this way, with Mark Shapiro, Ross Atkins, have been a file and trial organization that once you file numbers, if you don't make a deal before you file numbers, the only way they do make a deal is if it's a multi-year deal. And otherwise you're going to go to a hearing. And so, now whether, they're sticking to that, we'll see. Whether that'll be the case with Vladimir Guerrero Jr., we'll see. Obviously, the idea of getting a multi-year deal with him is something that they want. Sometimes, this is a way to stimulate negotiations. But it sounds like they're a long ways apart. And so this is really right now just about what you're going to get paid in 2025. And, they can get that deal done and still negotiate a long-term deal if they want to.
Yeah, if they want to. I think I guess we've got to get to that answer first, don't we, Steve? Do they really, really want Vladimir Guerrero Jr. to retire a Blue Jay? Is that a priority for Mark Shapiro?
I got to tell you, I don't know the answer to it. I mean, if we look at actions, then it's not certainly been a priority necessarily because, my view all along was the best deal they could make is if they could have done it in November. And what we've seen is, sure enough, what's happened since is that with the Soto signing, the price has gone up. And we're hearing now that the two sides are about $100 million apart. That Guerrero's camp is looking at $450 right now, and the Jays, which would mean the Jays were in the $350 range. And $350 probably would have gotten it done in November before Soto signed for that kind of money. Now, the other thing that complicates this is the Blue Jays were in on Soto, and they were in on him from every indication over $700 million, or at $700 million. And, it was clearly a statement that they prioritized Soto over Guerrero because they didn't pursue Guerrero right out of at the end of the season. They pursued Soto. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how Vladdy's feelings are, whether he looks at it and says, look, you chose Guerrero or Soto over me, so I'm going to look around before I decide to come back here too, or whether they'll find some ground to get a deal done. Indications are Vladdy would like to stay, but he wants what the market says his value is, and it's really unclear to me because Vladdy's better than Pete Alonso, right? He is. But Pete Alonso is a 40 home run guy, and he can't get any traction in his market at all. I mean, he wants, Scott Boras is representing Alonso, and they set their sights on the Prince Fielder deal from, decades ago, which was about $219 million. Now, Freddie Freeman's paid about $168 million. Matt Olson about $172, and Alonso. So I think Alonso is instructive on Vladdy, but I think Vladdy looks at himself more like Soto than he does like Pete Alonso. And I don't know what the market is going to say about that. So I think the Jays are in a tough spot. I think Vladdy's in a tough spot. His agent's in a tough spot because he looks at himself and says, I'm at least half as good as Juan Soto. Why wouldn't I get at least half the amount of money that Juan Soto, which would be $380 million. And, it doesn't, there's no indication the Jays are willing to go to that number, but I think it's going to at least take that to get it done, and probably a number starting with a 4.
So, Steve, it looks like, as you say, the Jays are in a tough spot here on Vladdy and just on the offseason in general, which has not gone the way I'm sure they planned it to. If you were brought in, Steve, to sort of be a crisis management guy here and help these guys out of this problem that they find themselves in here a month away from pitchers and catchers reporting, essentially, like, where would you even start to help them pull this disaster of an offseason out of the fire?
Yeah, I would say let's get Santander signed, close that out, let's get it done. Then let's go to Scott Boras and say we'll sign both Bregman and Pete Alonso. And, it's going to take probably more for Bregman than Alonso because Bregman's market is more robust than Alonso's market. But then I would trade Vladdy. And so what you get, you'd get the replacement for Vladdy and Alonso. You get Bregman at third base. Here's the thing. Vladdy's going to make about $30 million, $31 million, $32 million. Alonso's going to make about 22, 23. They're already in on Santander with the budget they currently have. So sign Santander and then go get Bregman, get him signed, and then go to Boras, say, look, we'll get both these guys. You can't go back to the Mets. And give them a chance to sign Alonso. We're willing to get it done. We want them. And then you trade Guerrero, and you get prospects to replenish your farm system, or you go get a closer, you go get starting pitching, you go to Seattle, and you say, we'll take Bryce Miller or Logan Gilbert out of your rotation, and then do that. Then you hope you get Sasaki, and then you go win a World Series.
Oh, well, then, exactly. That sounds great. I mean, I just don't see how that is obviously going to happen, and I also don't see how they're going to be comfortable with that, Steve. Like, I think the concern that I have here when it comes to Vladdy is if you can't sign this guy, how can you sign anybody? Like, how are they possibly going to prove that they can sign anybody of substance if you can't keep a kid who's been in your system since he was 16 and has made it very clear he actually wants to stay here for a long time? How?
Yeah.
Like, the biggest contract they've ever signed is George Springer. 6 years, $150. Right. That's peanuts. That's nothing. They are not a big game player. They never have been. Yeah. They spread their money out. They're top 10 in payroll, so they spread money out. There's no denying that. The Springer deal, that's it. That's Pirates money, man. That's Reds territory. So if you can't get Vladdy done, how can you reasonably expect them to get anybody else done? Like, how's it going to happen?
Yeah. Well, so I think you get guys done who want money, right? And so it's going to be somebody. Listen, this is about.
That's what Vladdy wants, though, Steve. Vladdy wants money. So, why won't you pay him?
Right. Well, because here's the thing. They may not think. It would not be unreasonable to say we're not comfortable giving him 12 years. I would understand that if that's the logic that they have. I would understand it. I would give it to him, but I understand why somebody might not want to.
Mm-hmm.
He's a big guy. I just saw pictures of him in the Dominican. He's a big guy.
Yep.
And I can understand that argument. But if that's the case, then set yourself up to win in 2025, and there's still time to do it, to be creative and pivot. And now you're going to have a lot go right to be able to do it. And so what you're going to have to do, though, is you're going to have to be the team with the most money on the table. Mm-hmm. And again, it's not necessarily, $400 million for one guy. It's giving money to Bregman, giving money to Alonso, giving money to Santander, and spreading it out in a way. And so, and I think you might put together a better team than if you sign Vladdy and have to pay him the $40 million or whatever, $35 million or whatever he thinks he should get. Then you might not have the money left over to address third base and address left field in that. And so, I think. But, all of that, look, Ross Atkins and Mark are smart guys. Whatever anybody else thinks I know them. They're smart guys. They've thought of all of this. They whatever their plan is with Vladdy, it's been thought out. Whether it's good logic, bad logic, whatever, they have a plan. And right now, it does not seem like signing him is going to be part of it, just because if there's a $100 million gap, that's just a statement of, this is who we think you are, this is who you think you are. There's not middle ground on $100 million.
No, it's a massive gap.
It's not only the length of the contract that there's a disagreement, but there's also the dollars per year that there's a disagreement of some significance. And so, look, the reason Vladdy will get a lot of money is because he's 25, and you're gonna give him a longer term contract. And therefore, the money's going to compound itself. It's why Soto was able to get beyond Ohtani, was because Ohtani was 30 and Soto's 25. Mm-hmm. And so you get the extra years, the 15 years versus 10, that's automatically taking you, 150, 200 million beyond where, the AAV might dictate. So, look, I think that it's been a tough offseason. There's still players on the board that if they get them, we could walk away saying, they had a pretty good offseason. It's still possible for them to do that. But if it's just Santander, they keep Vladdy, they play it out for a year, that's not enough offense, for my money, for them to really, truly compete in the division where the Red Sox have taken a big step forward. The Yankees are still going to be good, and the Orioles are going to be very competitive.
Well, Steve, I love your vision a lot more than anything I've heard from the guys actually in the seats, as much as I know you respect those dudes. What do you do if you are continuing on this track? Because I'm loving it. I'm loving your crisis management. I'm loving you pulling this offseason out of the fire for the Blue Jays. If you had to continue, what do you do about the problem named Bo Bichette?
Yeah, I think you play it out for a year, or what you do is you hedge your bet, you protect yourself, and maybe what you end up doing is you take a risk. On a one-year deal, you trade Vladdy. Look, I don't care if I get the guys I want, I'll trade Vladimir Guerrero Jr. to anybody, including within the division. I would, because it's for 1 year. Like there's no guarantee somebody's going to be able to sign him. But I would go to the Red Sox, and I might get Tristan Cassis and Marcelo Mayer, and within that, get my replacement for Bichette for next year, and play Bichette out for this year. See what he does and build his value. If he builds value and I got a chance to move and Mayer's ready, then maybe I make a move during the season to bring the kid up. But you go and get your shortstop in the Guerrero trade. If again, a lot has to go right. And it's easy for me to spend somebody else's money. The one thing I will tell you is this. If general managers have money available to them from the owner, they're going to spend it. When it looks like they're not spending, it's usually not a general manager's issue. It's an owner's issue about the money's not there for the general manager. Because if they have it, they're going to spend it. And so, if it's me and I'm Ross Atkins, and I've gotten the approval to sign Vladdy, I'm going to go get it done. And if I don't get it done, it's probably because I don't have the money available to me. It's not because I don't want them. And so I think that as much as we want to put it on the front office, this comes down to, if the money was there for Ohtani and the money was there for Soto, then where is the money? Now, it's different because it's the number of years, but on an AAV, if it's $47.5 million for Soto or $50 million, and they were in at that level, then where's the $50 million they had to spend for the other players available in the market? And if they're not spending it, not because they don't want to, it's because it might not still be available, and it was exclusive for Soto or Ohtani.
That's very possible. I think Ohtani in particular. I mean, Ohtani represented something completely different. Soto, to me, though, is one that is difficult to explain, that you'd have the money for him, but you can't spread it out throughout the rest of the lineup. Great player, phenomenal player, but not Ohtani. Like, not Ohtani, not Judge. Like, in terms of ticket selling, jersey selling, buzz creation, Soto just isn't on the same level. So if you had a green light to go up to 650, 680, 700, the idea that, nothing else would be available to you seems very, unreasonable, or just it doesn't seem like something an executive would suggest. And here's what I would say about the idea of them salvaging the offseason. If they've concluded Vladdy's not a part of their program, they should have traded him 2 months ago, 3 months ago. Like that would have been one that, sure, the fan base would have freaked out a little bit, but at least you would have proven you had a plan. If Shapar and Atkins flipped him in November and got all these different pieces and then attacked the offseason rigorously, it would be different. But now it just feels like they've missed that opportunity. Like it's like a scramble now, Steve. And, sure, they can salvage it. There's still guys out there, like you mentioned. The big three right now in terms of bats, Alonso, Bregman, and Santander, they're all 30 years old. They're all good players. But, it's if you get one of them and then Vladdy and Bo walk at the end of the year, what's that doing for your future? What's the point?
Right. Well, to your point, I mean, right, a reason, like, that's very reasonable and understandable. And so to think that their plan was to only keep Vladdy for the year and that they didn't want to sign him doesn't make sense. So my sense is they probably do want to sign him, but, maybe there was a miscalculation on timing. Maybe there was, we want Vladdy, but we prefer Soto. And if we can only sign one, which is probably maybe what ownership thought, that we can't keep both these guys, so make a choice. If you want Soto, let's go get Soto. Now the problem is that, and again, it makes like when something seems like it's missing, it doesn't make sense. Then there's something we don't understand.
Yeah.
And because here's the thing: if you wanted Soto, great. If you still want Vladdy after you didn't get Soto, and there's not a deal getting done, and the money should be there because you had the money there for Soto, then it may mean that Vladdy doesn't want to sign. Right? That would be a reasonable explanation as to why a deal's not getting done, because clearly the money is going to be less for Guerrero than it was for Soto, and if you had it for Soto and you're not spending it on Guerrero, it must mean that Guerrero doesn't really want to come back here. That would be a reasonable explanation. It's unclear, but it would be reasonable. So, I think that you're right. If they didn't want to keep Vladdy, they would have traded him. They would have. But they wanted to keep him if they didn't get Soto. But the risk you run when you go after Soto and not Vladdy is that Vladdy says, why would I want to be your second choice?
Right, emotion gets in
I
there,
get
man.
it.
Emotion.
Right, and I get it from his perspective. But, I also think that maybe they thought that he would be okay with it, and maybe he's not. Or maybe they had money for both, right? Those are some of the things that we don't know, those conversations. But if it's me, I'm going to sign Vladdy if I have the money to sign him, and if he wants to sign, even if I have to go back to ownership and say, look, you know what, we miscalculated. By waiting, it cost us an extra $100 million. Now, owners don't like that, and it may put you in jeopardy, but I still would want to sign him.
Yep. Well, we'll see. We'll see if they end up in arbitration or not. I guess we got to, cross that bridge first before we get to anything else. Great catching up with you, Steve. We'll do it again soon. Thank you for this.
You bet, guys. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Steve Phillips, our TSN baseball insider. All right, a lot to unpack there. We'll continue to touch on Vladdy throughout the afternoon. We got the Raptors coming off the Knicks loss last night in Cleveland tonight, so it's certainly not going to get easier for them. Jack Armstrong in the next hour. Mark Schlereth on Wild Card Weekend coming up as well. Dave Feschuk of the Star in here with me. I'm Bryan Hayes. OverDrive continues. TSN 1050N on the TSN app. All right, Mark Schlereth coming up. It sounds like Tyreek Hill. It's all good in Miami. Everything's fine. He quit on the team in the fourth quarter the other night, but and then said after the game, Dave, I'm out. I'm done. I got to get out of here.
Yeah.
Now it's all good again. It's amazing.
And then put the Antonio Brown, picture with Antonio Brown ripping off his gear as his profile pic on social media, from what I understand.
Yes.
Other than that, everything's fine.
Everything's fine. And I saw Drew Rosenhaus was down in Miami. He was on with McAfee today, and he's animated and, of course, talking about Tyreek, and everything's great and amazing, and he's committed, as you would expect. Any agent always going to fall on the sword for his client. But why would Miami want him back is the question. Like, if this guy quit on you and he's going to be a pain in the ass the rest of the way, assuming there's issues and the uncertainty with Tua, like, he's a cheat code, but he wasn't a cheat code this year. He wasn't great this year based on his own standards.
Look at the Buffalo Bills. Look at your division rival in Buffalo. They thought, what are we going to do without Stephon Diggs, who was a bit of a diva and wanted, things to go well for Stephon Diggs. They've been okay without Stephon Diggs.
They sure have.
It's been a bit more about the Buffalo Bills than it was about Mr. Diggs.
Absolutely. So I don't think that story's over. I'll believe it when I see Tyreek Hill as a Miami Dolphin week 1 next year. But Mark Schlereth will join us. We'll get into Wild Card Weekend with Mark. We'll break down the games, what he's looking at, and what he thinks could happen, because underdogs every year, at least one, if not two, win outright, right? Wild Card Weekend. So which games are the most likely to see an upset? That and more coming up with Mark and Jack Armstrong on the Raptors. Losing again at the Garden last night and in action in Cleveland tonight. Overdrive continues. TSN 1050 soon to be up on TSN 2.